I am pleading for my people, a poor, downtrodden race who dwells in freedom's boasted land with no abiding place. I am pleading that my people may have their rights restored, for they have long been toiling and yet have no reward. I bear upon my body the scars of many a gash. I am pleading for my people that groan beneath the lash. But while your kindest sympathies to foreign lands do roam, I ask you to remember your own oppressed at home. I plead with you to sympathize with sighs and groans and scars, and note how base the tyranny beneath the stripes and stars.
Isabel Baumfree was born a slave in the 1790s in rural New York State. Her living conditions were terrible. She often went hungry and endured beatings. She was forced into marriage and sold several times and watched helplessly as her brothers, sisters, and children were torn from her and sold. In 1826, she escaped from slavery. The story could have ended there, but it didn't. In 1843, she had a religious conversion that led her to change her name to Sojourner Truth. She began her mission to speak to as many people as she could about her personal vision of God. As a traveling preacher, she preached about God's desire for an equitable society where race, class, and gender were all embraced and celebrated, and was convinced he was guiding her very footsteps. This belief gave her the courage to speak in public even when facing unsafe situations, particularly for a woman of color. She was known to say, "God, you drive." In the 1850s, men and women were not treated as equals. Women of color were enslaved in much of the country, and all women had limited opportunities for education or careers and were not expected to have political opinions or to even speak publicly. Even some women's rights advocates believed that only white women should be given the right to vote. Women of color have made many contributions to all women's rights by standing on Sojourner Truth's shoulders. In the 1913 National Women's Rights Parade in Washington, D.C., Ida B. Wells Barnett and her Black Women's Suffrage Club were forbidden to march with the all-white Chicago delegation and were sent to the back of the parade. There they were joined by members of the newly created Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, a Black sorority, and by civil rights activist Mary Church Terrell. These brave women were jeered at, spit on, and hit, yet still they marched for all women's rights. 7 long decades after Sojourner Truth spoke in Akron, white women were given the right to vote. Black women had to wait for the 1964 passage of the Civil Rights Act. In the 1850s, Sojourner Truth was famous for her activism. People came from miles around to hear her speak and sing. The words to the song you just heard, "I am pleading for my people," were written by Truth. At over 6 feet tall, Sojourner Truth had a commanding presence when she spoke. When she stood to speak, she did so with quiet dignity, telling spellbinding stories to illustrate her points. She was very good at handling audiences, even angry ones. She once said, I feel safe in the midst of my enemies, for the truth is powerful and will prevail. In 1848, the first Women's Rights Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York. In 1851, the Second Ohio Women's Rights Convention was held in Akron, Ohio on May 28th and 29th. This is a drawing of the old stone church where the event was hosted. Newspaper reports share that the structure was packed with people, many not in favor of women's rights. Sojourner Truth was not invited to the convention, but attended anyway. She was not asked to speak, but rose to advocate for all women's rights, including women of color. As recorded, on the second day of the conference, a black woman, about 6 feet tall, wearing a bonnet and a long dress, approached the stage to address the crowd. She challenged the exclusion of women of color from the women's movement with her speech, remembered as, "Ain't I a Woman?" Thanks to the women like Sojourner Truth, all women have the right to vote, but true equity does not yet exist for women, and particularly for women of color. The Sojourner Truth Project, Akron, aims to call attention to Sojourner Truth's work by installing a statue and plaza in honor of her and her famous speech in Akron, Ohio. While most everyone knows the speech as "Ain't I a Woman?", that version was written by Frances Dana Gage 12 years after it was spoken. A more accurate version of Sojourner Truth's speech was first printed in the Anti-Slavery Bugle by Reverend Marius Robinson just after the convention. That is the speech you will hear now.
I want to say a few words about this matter. I am a woman's rights. I have as much muscle as any man and can do as much work as any man. I have plowed and reaped and husked and chopped and mowed. And can any man do more than that? I can carry as much as any man and eat as much too, if I can get it. I am as strong as any man there is now. As for intellect, I say, if a woman has a pint and a man a quart, why can't she have her little pint full? And you need not be afraid to give us our rights, for fear we will take too much, for we can only take as much as our pint a whole. The poor men seems to be all in confusion and don't know what to do. Why, children, if you have woman's rights, give it to her and you will feel better. You will have your rights and they won't be so much trouble. I can't read, but I can hear. And I heard the Bible. And I learned that Eve caused man to sin. If woman upset the world, do give her a chance to get it right side up again. The lady spoke about Jesus and how he never spurned woman away from him. And she was right. When Lazarus died, Mary and Martha came to Jesus with faith and love and besought him to raise their brother. Jesus wept, and Lazarus came forth. And how came your Jesus into the world? Through God who created him and woman who bore him. Man, where is your part? But the women are coming up. Blessed be God. And a few of the men are coming up with them. but mine is in a tight place. The poor slave is on him, the woman coming on him. He is surely between a hawk and a buzzard.
Sojourner Truth's most famous speech took place here in Akron in 1851 on High Street. It was the north side of Akron, close to the Pennsylvania and Ohio Canal. So today's visitors will be surprised by the transition over time of the landscape. As part of the Western Reserve, Akron and what we know today as Summit County was part of a hotbed of abolitionism. Even in 1805, Owen Brown, the father of John Brown, brought his family here to be around like-minded people. So over the years, Akron has played home and acted as a sanctuary city to individuals looking for their equal rights. The 1851 Ohio Women's Convention was located in Akron most likely due to the role of two women, Martha J. Tilden and Rana Dada, who were part of the convention in 1850 in Salem, Ohio, not very far away. Now, what's very important to know is that in March of 1851, the Ohio Constitutional Convention had just adjourned. And unfortunately, there was no opportunity for women's rights to vote included in that update of the 1803 Constitution for Ohio. It was the role of the Ohio Women's Constitution here in Akron to try to amend the opportunity by encouraging people to not vote for this constitutional upgrade. In June of 1851, unfortunately, that did not happen, and women in Ohio did not receive the right to vote until 1920 with the passage of the 19th Amendment.
The Summit Suffrage Centennial Committee is an accomplished group of women from Summit County, Ohio, who are dedicated to serving this community in various capacities. The committee began the collective work planning in late 2018 with preparations to honor our past by shaping our future, with local events to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the suffrage march and the ratification of the 19th Amendment, women's right to vote, although it excluded minority women. Sojourner Truth was an abolitionist and suffragist, and it's fitting for the world-known suffragist who spoke here in Akron, Ohio, May 29, 1851, to be honored. We have achieved many milestones to date, but we would like to recognize our champion and pioneer who began this discussion 20 years ago, Faye Dambrot. Although she's no longer with us, her spirit walks with me daily. We honor Faye and the individuals who first made a mark toward the statue's idea. Sojourner Truth stood tall for everyone when it was unpopular to do so. Her attributes are defined as being courageous, a leader, temperance, while remaining accountable to speak up for the enslaved and for the fight for our vote. She was a preacher. She often asked God, "Guide my steps as I go out and speak." Her travels led her here to our proud history in Akron, Ohio. It is imperative that we honor this famous speech that was written and spoken here, "Ain't I a woman?" ? She was unwelcome, uninvited, unwanted, but she still spoke up for women of all races. We didn't benefit as African Americans to vote until it was signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson in 1965. That's when we began our constitutional rights. Today, we still fight for the untreatment at the ballot box, but we're determined to continue to get into good trouble.
Her legacy is very important to Akron because before we were the rubber capital of the world, there was Sojourner Truth. Before there was a LeBron James, there was a Sojourner Truth. Before there was an NAACP, there was a Sojourner Truth who laid a foundation that helped Akron look at life and look at where we should be going together differently.
Some time ago, a few community members shared with me the idea of creating a statue that would forever memorialize Sojourner Truth and her legacy in our community. Without hesitation, I embrace this worthy tribute. She blazed a trail for those of us to follow, helping to ensure that her vision and commitment to equality would live long after she no longer walked among us. And though she did not see much progress in her lifetime, and even today, Black and brown women and men are still fighting for voting rights and civil rights, we have made some gains. Those gains are attributable to courageous leaders like Sojourner Truth, who throughout history have made an immeasurable difference in the lives of so many. Today, we stand on her shoulders, and as we seek to achieve true equality, Sojourner's words still resonate with us and remind us of how far we have come and how far we must still go. We owe so much to fearless women like Sojourner Truth, and it is well past time to memorialize her speech and her spirit here forever.
Well, what I'm projecting here is her extending herself. The outreach hand and the open palm and everything is an extension of what she's talking about, to gather people together to feel exactly what she's feeling. In this particular case, it was women's suffrage. A lot of not just Black women, but all women of all different walks of life are receiving the benefits of what she proposed during that period, women's suffrage.
So I would say it's so important to honor the legacy of Sojourner Truth because she was a woman who dared to stand up. She was a woman who dared to be everything that she was and use all of those experiences to propel a movement. And we are enduring and celebrating and excited about that 200 years later. Now, we are certainly not exactly where we want to be, and she may be discouraged about that and a bit disappointed, but that is another reason for us to keep going and to keep engaging and know that when you've got the right decision or you're on the right side of history, you will have people who 200 years later are erecting a statue of you and talking about you and praising you and thanking you for your leadership. And that's really important. That legacy is important for Akron, but it's also important for me, and I hope it's important for our community as a whole.
If you had one thing or one word you would say about Sojourner Truth, what would it be?
A wonderful, wonderful woman that paved the way for many lives to follow on after her life. And I am grateful for that opportunity.
Preacher.
Epic.
Trailblazer.
Valiant.
Gutsy.
Courageous.
Anointing.
Visionary.
Fearless. Mediator.
Advocate.
Have you ever heard of Sojourner Truth? Many people haven't. She was an abolitionist and a suffragist. She was born in New York in 1797 and her first language was Dutch. She was first sold at the age of 10 for $100 and some sheep and was sold multiple times throughout her life.
During the Civil War, she helped recruit Black soldiers for the Unions. At this time, she preached and helped raise money for the Union.
Truth played a huge role in both the abolitionist and suffragist movement. Her role in the suffragist movement was often overshadowed by white voices. She made her voice known by her famous speech, "Ain't I a Woman?"
Sojourner gave this speech at a women's rights convention in Akron, Ohio on May 29, 1851. But many people know her only for this accomplishment. Some people don't know her at all.